All right, Deuteronomy chapter 13, dealing with people who would bring in error, false doctrine, and particularly as he opens up there, he's talking about a prophet that comes along and wants to lead you to worship false gods or worship God through images and things like that. And he tells them, of course, you cannot tolerate that. And we know there are parallels in the New Testament. This was question number 5 in that study about how we're warned against people who would bring in things contrary to the doctrine of Christ. We're supposed to mark them, perhaps withdraw from them if they're a member of the local congregation. But we are to no more tolerate error than the Israelites were when somebody wanted to bring idolatry in among them. And we need to hold fast to the ways of the Lord, no matter how interesting or rewarding or easy the false way may be. And that's part of the allurement, that there's something more exciting in the error. There's something more rewarding. There's some type of physical or material thing that you get out of it. Or maybe even sometimes just a good feeling. I mean, a lot of what Joel Osteen works on 2 things really. One is he works on this idea of prosperity. You just, say you love Jesus and you'll have a bank account full of money after you give him money. The other thing is you just feel good because he's not going to condemn you in sin. There is no rebuke. So sometimes it's just that, it makes me feel better type of thing. And it doesn't matter how good we may feel, we can't let that feeling be the thing that guides us in our religious beliefs and practices. We have to be convicted of truth and follow it. And so no matter how difficult the right way is, that's the way that we need to go. What was to be done with the false prophet? Do what? Killed. Executed. All right, let's read now Deuteronomy 13, verses 6 through 11. 6 through 11 as he gets into another issue of people pulling us away. Deuteronomy 13, 6 through 11. Who will read that? Philip.
Neither you nor your fathers, of the gods of the people which are all around you, near you or far off from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. You shall not consent to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him or conceal him. But you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. You shall stone him with stones until he dies, because he sought to entice you away from the Lord your God, and brought you out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. So all Israel shall hear and fear, and not again do such wickedness as this among them.
All right. So don't tolerate a false teacher among whom? Your family. Not just some guy who's out there teaching this, but somebody in your own family, whether it's your brother, your son, your daughter, even your wife. No matter who it is that brings this, the closest people, the people you love most on earth, no matter who it is, you're not to spare that person. You're not to keep it private. The first part in chapter 13 is the idea of somebody publicly out there declaring this. And you need to address that because they're a prophet. That's their job, going out and proclaiming things. Here is a thing where somebody in your family just, conversation says, we should go after this God. We should worship these things. And he's saying, don't do that. Don't keep it private. And do not pity them. In fact, he tells them what is to be done when this person is executed. Philip. Yeah, one to cast the first stone. Exactly right. So that's how serious he is about this. Imagine having to cast a stone at your own son or daughter, or your wife or your husband, and to see that they are put to death. Has anyone, by the way, ever seen a stoning? Okay, there are videos online of people who've been stoned. It's a brutal way to die. And this is what he's telling them to do. Stone them. Your hand is to be the first one, and then others join in stoning this person to death. Why would they do that? Why would this be authorized by God? In fact, commanded by God?
Long term, okay, it would be detrimental to the nation. It would ultimately entice the nation to fall. Okay, and when a nation falls, it's not just the fall of the nation. I mean, the women are going to get raped. You know what happens? People are going to get killed. Things are going to be a total disaster. And this is maybe the beginning of something that can be very great and evil in the future. So he's trying to nip it in the bud.
Okay, there's the fall of a nation that would eventually happen. The Israelites in particular, because they've been told, if you go after idolatry, I will remove my favor from you, and your enemies will chase you, defeat you, carry you off into captivity. Of course, we know that eventually happens. So in part, he's trying to prevent that. What else?
It's your deterrent. It's to help others to not fall into the same situation.
So the death penalty is a deterrent?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Death penalty is a deterrent. When it's done, and it's done swiftly, as Ecclesiastes, I think it's 11:8 talks about, you know, if you're slow to act in justice, if you're slow to punish a crime, you're slow to punish evil, well, then people are going to do it. But if you're swift in it and you take care of business, other people are going to be less apt to follow it in that evil, that wickedness. So one of the things here in the family doing it is it's going to help prevent false charges. You know, it's one thing to say something. Maybe you get angry at your brother. Maybe you have a dispute over the inheritance, and you think, well, I'll just take care of that. I'll accuse him of idolatry, and somebody will get rid of him, and he'll be gone away, and then I can have everything. Well, if your hand has to be the first to stone him to death, it may slow you down a little bit. So that could be a part of it, but also because it shows that you had no part in it, that you stand against that idolatry. I've known of cases where elders and leaders in a congregation are the first to stand against their own family when their family has entered into sin. I'm thinking in particular of a case where one of their children who wasn't in the home anymore but was in sin, stood up, publicly condemned them for that sin, and led the withdrawal from that individual. So we need to be ones who put our love for the Lord first. You know, as Jesus talked about, if you love son or daughter, father or mother, even your own life more than me, you're not worthy of me. So we have to put the Lord first in all these things, even when it means standing against and condemning people we love very dearly. Any other thoughts there? All right, so question number 6. I'm not going to read the rest of the chapter, but it talks about how if it's known that this city it's reported and they're promoting idolatry, they're practicing it, go and do the investigation, find out whether or not it is so. And what's going to be the result if you go in and you utterly defeat that city, you offer it essentially as a burnt offering to the Lord. If you extinguish that idolatry, what's the result? This is question 6 in that lesson. God's mercy and compassion where? On His people. Hank, did you have something?
Well, the entire city is turned, then they're supposed to smite the whole city with their swords.
Kill them all.
Kill them all.
Exactly. So when you read through this, you understand that God is deadly, not using that figuratively, but literally deadly serious about apostasy. He says, don't tolerate it. If it's found to be there, you annihilate it. You get rid of it. Any other thoughts? Zach?
It's more than Him turning away from us, showing us the mercy and compassion. And in fact, that's all in 17. But the end of verse 17, after it says, have compassion, is and multiply you or make you increase. So there's the lack of punishment from God. There's Him extending mercy and compassion on us. But then there's I will then make you grow from that. Growth comes after cutting away, getting rid of that which hinders growth.
Right, exactly right. There's a twofold. The negative removed and the positive applied. Exactly right. Any other thoughts?
They nearly got rid of Benjamin because of this.
They
They
knew,
nearly got rid of Benjamin because of this.
Yeah,
Benjamin nearly got exterminated because of this.
right.
Similar.
They went to war. That's for sure. All right, let's get into Deuteronomy chapter 14 now. Deuteronomy 14, let's read just verses 1 and 2 to start with here. Who will grab that for us? 1 and 2. Paul.
You are the children of the Lord your God. You shall not cut yourself, nor shave the front of your head for the dead. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God, and the Lord has chosen you to be a people for Himself, a special treasure about all the people. You are on the face of the earth.
Okay, so what's this dealing with? You may even have a little headline there.
Obedience.
There's obedience involved with it for sure.
In ancient days, when they when they were born, they would cut themselves. So the city, should do that. Mourn properly. But don't do it improperly.
Right. He's not telling them to don't mourn at all. You get to the New Testament, especially you think about Jesus and Lazarus, Mary and Martha. They were mourning. They were sad. Jesus went out to the grave. He wept. So he's not saying don't mourn. What the warning is, this is how idolatrous people act. Don't act that way. Don't cut yourself. Don't shave your forehead back. Don't mimic them. Don't act like the culture around you. What is something similar Paul says in the New Testament? Does anybody remember? Don't mourn as those who have no hope. Right? We are to mourn our loved ones. That's proper. We are to even mourn fellow Christians who die. But we don't mourn like those who have no hope. Because if someone dies in the Lord, we have reasonable confidence that they lived a good and faithful life. We have reasonable confidence that they're going to be in the resurrection of the righteous and that we will see them again one day and join them in heaven. And we have confidence that their state now is better than their state was here in this world. So we mourn, but we don't mourn like the people of the world. There's some people in the world who simply cannot handle death. And they avoid it like the plague. They don't want to be anywhere around. There are some Christians, I know of some that they don't want their children and they themselves do not want to go to a funeral home. They do not want to see any dead body. They don't want to see the casket. even their own family. I've known of a case where even their own family, they won't go in and look at the body. They'll avoid looking at the body. That is unhealthy. As Christians, we should be very comfortable, in one sense, with death. It is a reality. And if somebody has lived for the Lord, we miss them, but they're okay. They're perfectly okay. Joe?
Solomon said it's better to be in the house of mourning than the house of mourning.
Yes, exactly. Better to be a house of mourning than the house of feasting. Exactly right. Ron?
Steve, I'm just thinking in this, at least to me, there is an inference about God's view on even their bodies. As we know in the book of Leviticus, that when they mourned, they weren't to, as we just noted here, cut themselves or disfigure themselves or tattoo themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, as a young man, you know, that was commonly taught about recognizing, you know, what God has created and just helping to get that principle in your mind. Like you said a little while ago, the purpose of this for them was to not be associated with the world and the practices of the world.
Right. That paganism and what they did with their bodies, and yes, the same principle applies today. You know, your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. You're not to take that and abuse it and misuse it and disfigure it and be like the people of the world around you. Exactly right. All right, let's read verses 3 through 21, please. Deuteronomy 14, 3 through 21. Well, I'll tell you what, let's skip that because it's a long list. So let's just answer question number 1 here. I asked you to list 2 or 3 unclean animals. Are they forbidden only for dietary and health reasons, or is there something else? So just 2 or 3 of these here.
Well, pig.
Okay, swine.
The reason, I mean, obviously God can tell, hey, there's a microscopic bacteria here that can probably get into your body at the time. They probably didn't cook it well. So it's probably had health benefits at the time.
All right, we're going to dig right on that here in just a second. What other unclean animals?
Vultures and buzzards, eagles, basically animals that ate carcasses, dead carcasses.
Animals ate carcasses, dead carcasses. Camel, it's unclean. Catfish, it's unclean. So who would have a hard time living under that restriction? I ate a lot of ham. A lot of ham. That would be a challenge for me. But let's understand, this is not a dietary law. This is not dietary. This is chiefly, primarily about holiness. God laid down this law, said these are things you can eat and these are things you can't eat. And maybe there are some dietary benefits to various ones of these. But the primary thing is, this is the difference between you and other people. And drawing a clear line in that. They're not to eat what others ate. It was impure simply because God declared it to be impure. When you get to the New Testament, what does it say?
All things are pure.
All things. You have Peter's vision in Acts 10, and of course later Paul talks about, you can eat anything, give thanks to God, you're good to go.
Well, to me it was like laying down the principle of clean and unclean. So it was conceptually teaching them to recognize the difference between what is acceptable and what is not acceptable to God.
I'm going to change one word there, concretely. Okay? Because this would be a day in, day out thing for all of their lives. What they were eating, they were taking in things that were clean, things that were holy versus things unclean, unholy. Remember, again, this economy under the law of Moses was very physical, very material, but it was teaching principles, it was teaching lessons with it. And this would have been a daily, multiple times a day reinforcement of, we follow God's commands, we only eat things that are clean, that God approves of, we only do what God approves of. So it was a very real thing for them every single day. Any other thoughts? Ron?
I failed to make note of this in terms of the verse, but over in the book of Acts, one restriction we do have that continues is not eating of blood.
Exactly. That principle, that truth of not eating blood is from beginning to end in the Bible, and it repeats that. And that's a great example of where the things that God brought from the old into the new, He stated those things. And the others, of course, have been lifted, but the eating of the blood is still sinful, just like in that list there in Acts 15 in particular, fornication and idolatry, things like that, they're all lumped in together. All right, so carrying forward into the New Testament, it tells us that we are not to be like the world. Let's go and look real quick. Keep your place in Deuteronomy, but 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 3 and 4. 1 Peter 4, 3 and 4. And who will read that for us? 1 Peter 4, 3 and 4. Go ahead, Charles.
We have spit it up of our past lifetimes in doing the will of the Gentiles. And we walked in lewdness, lust, drunkenness, robberies, drinking parties, and abomination of idolatry. In regard to these, they think it strange that you do not run the field in the same blood of dispensation, speaking evil of you.
Okay. So he makes the point, there was a time when we lived like the rest of the Gentiles. We behaved like the world around us. But now we don't act like that, and they think we're strange. We're weird, we're odd, we're different. Well, a child of God is supposed to be weird, odd, different from the viewpoint of the world. We're not to behave like them. So what are some of the ways, whether things Peter listed or other ways, that we're not to be like the world around us? What's something you find very common every day? Guys who work in construction, Zach? Language. Boom. Pretty much any type of secular workplace is going to be filled with language. And there are some that are known more so than others. Any others? The way you dress, the way you appear, right? Proverbs chapter 7 talks about the attire of a harlot. She was not a harlot. She was a married woman, but she looked like a harlot. There is a way that is proper to dress and ways that are improper to dress. What else? What about entertainment? What we watch. Do we just watch everything else that the world watches and we have no discernment in that? We watch all the nudity and all the stuff with the language in it. Sometimes if somebody was standing in our living room using those words, we would be very uncomfortable with our family there. But for some reason, because it's on a video on a screen, sometimes people are like, it's not a big deal. So entertainment. What about worship? Are we different from the world in the way we worship? We need to be different. Instead of mimicking them, we just simply follow what the Bible says. More and more I'm hearing of churches of Christ that are slowly incorporating what they see denominations doing around them. That's because it seems exciting, it's drawing a crowd, it's the new thing, things like that. Clint?
You are actively involved or sought out to skip. skip. You can go next week. It's fine. You can miss it. It's all right. And that's not how a Christian should think. Not how he should or she should influence at all. So that's kind of at a foundational level. But oftentimes there's all kinds of events that can happen during times of worship. And we need to say no.
Yeah, we want to make sure that our worship is according to the Scripture, what the Lord has laid out for us. We're to be different in what else? Not just the things we're not supposed to do, but what? Okay, things we think about, because that drives, out of the heart proceed the issues of life, and you just quoted Philippians 4:8. Think on things that are good, pure, noble, just. What? I thought I heard something over here, Ron. Okay. So the good things are kindness, humility, meekness, generosity, peacefulness, right? We're supposed to be peacemakers, right? So when we interact with the world around us, they should notice something's different. Not just that we don't participate in those worldly things, but that we stand out as good and decent people. And they know that about our character. Chris.
Well, it can be something as simple as while you're working, you go in and sit down in the lunchroom, or get people in there, you find a little place to sit, and you're the only one that bows to say a prayer over your food, and they see that you're doing what you should be doing.
Right. Yeah, there was one time I was at an airport waiting, to go down to the gate. I had gotten, it must have been an egg biscuit or something. But anyways, I sat there, I prayed, and as soon as I lifted my head, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and it was a pilot who said, "Thank you." It's so rare to see that. We just do a simple thing, and people will recognize. Now, some people may scoff at it, but there will be some people where we're declaring to the world we believe in God. We serve Him. We're not ashamed to serve Him. So yeah.
In our light shine, as we
Exactly.
And because of that, you will be mocked and ridiculed, and others will see it differently. They'll be like, I need to be more like that.
Right. And especially in the workplace, you never know what kind of door that could open either now or later to teach people the gospel, to have conversations with them. All right, let's jump to Deuteronomy 14 verses, I tell you what, let's read verses 29 or 22 through 29. Let's go ahead and grab that. 22 to 29. Who will grab that for us? Clint.
You shall tithe all the yield of your seed that comes from the field year by year before the Lord your God in the place that He will choose to make His name dwell there. You shall eat the tithe of your grain, of your wine, and of your oil, and the firstborn of your herd and flock, that you may learn to fear the Lord your God always. And if the way is too long for you, so that you are not able to carry the tithe, when the Lord your God blesses you because the place is too far from you, which the Lord your God chooses to set His name there, then you shall turn into money and bind up the money in your hand, go to the place that the Lord your God chooses, and spend the money for whatever you desire, oxen or sheep, or wine or strong drink, whatever your appetite craves. And you shall eat there before the Lord your God and rejoice, you and your household. And you shall not neglect the Levite who is within your towns, for he has no portion or inheritance with you. At the end of every 3 years you shall bring out all the tithe of your produce the same year and lay it up within your towns. And the Levite, because he has no portion or inheritance with you, and the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widows who are within your towns, shall come and eat and be filled, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands that you do.
Okay. So question number 2, I'd ask, what were the people to tithe? What's that? Yeah, pretty much everything, right? he gives this list of things here about what they are to tithe. And it talks about the increase of your grain in the field produces year by year. So this would be an ongoing thing that they do. So what lesson is there for us, Zach?
I was just going to ask, could it be saying tithe that which came in abundance compared to last year? Like you grew 1 acre of this crop, and it did better this year. It did 1.5 acres, so that extra half acre automatically becomes the tithe. Not that they couldn't choose more. Is that hard? Would that be possible here? Every single piece of produce that was grown.
Right. Yeah, I believe what the context is you may have stuff left over from last year, or last year, let's say you had 100 head of sheep, and this year you have 120. You tithe out of that 20 versus out of the 120, because he talks about the increase of it.
Yeah.
Just like we do. We don't tithe every Sunday, so to speak. We don't give every Sunday out of our total possessions, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute, so I'm giving it away. But out of the increase, out of what they produce for that year. So we're just stewards of the blessings that God gives us. We don't own them, right? We don't own anything. We just have them in our care. We're just managers of what God puts in our care. And what would those things be? What's that?
Everything.
Thank you. Specifically, what would some of those things be?
Land, automobile.
Land, automobiles?
Your job.
Okay, your job. What do you get from your job? Usually, income, some type of income, right? Whether you're employed or you have your own business or whatever it may be. So you get money. You have your home, which could be included in the land, I suppose. You have electronics. You have time. God gives you time. You need to use all these things in service to Him in ways that are pleasing and acceptable in His sight. We're to use them chiefly for what purpose? Why are we here on earth? To love Him and keep His commandments. Serve Him. Serve His kingdom. Advance that kingdom. That's our primary mission as children of God. We are to help others. Those who are less fortunate. We're to be able to look after them. And we'll talk more about that, I think, in this next chapter here. But this principle laid out here about them tithing or giving of their possessions, it was so that they would have fellowship and can maintain fellowship with God. It was a part of that requirement to have fellowship with Him. And one of the points made in the pulpit commentary on this was, fellowship with God is worth whatever it cost us. If it cost us everything, right? How did Jesus frame that rationale? Does anybody remember? If you gain the whole world and what? Lose your own soul. So what's it saying? If you had the whole world, you owned everything in it, it would be a bargain for you to give that away, to give it all up, so you could have a home in heaven. Right? When He talked to the rich young ruler had a problem with his possessions. He told him, you need to go sell it. Come follow me. So whatever price we have to pay to have fellowship with God, it is worth it. It's worth any expense involved. Any other thoughts there? All right, so question 3 I asked about what principles are given in the New Testament concerning giving. So what do we have? Cheerfully. It's found where? 2 Corinthians 9. Yes, very good. All right, what else? We're to give cheerfully. Give as you have been prospered.
Give in secret. Matthew 6.
Matthew 6. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. So you give privately. You don't do it for being praised, right? What else?
You have to purpose it in your heart. It has to be on purpose from your heart.
Purpose from your heart. What else? First day of the week. Okay? What else?
Acts 20:35. More blessed to give than to receive.
More blessed to give than receive. 1 Corinthians 13 says we have to give in love. So we can give all of our possessions. If we don't do it out of love, it profits us nothing. So there are all these principles in the New Testament concerning giving. As prospered bountifully, 2 Corinthians 9, as we purpose, 2 Corinthians 9, cheerfully, with love. God doesn't ask us to give everything, but He does ask us to give sacrificially. All right? Jesus making note of the widow with 2 mites, and she gave all that she had. We are to give sacrificially. If it's not sacrificially, then we're not giving as we ought to give. And I can't determine that for you. You can only determine that for yourself. Am I giving sacrificially, or am I just giving what's easy to give? Am I giving what's comfortable for me to give? Or does this giving, I've been asked through the years, well, how do you know if you're doing that? Well, if you didn't give, how would that change your life? What could you do if you didn't give? Could you buy a car easily? Could you buy a home? What could you do with that money that you're giving if you just quit giving? And depending on what scale that is, you look at that, well, it would make a very real difference. Mike.
I think the opposite question is valid also, and that is, if I didn't have all these expenditures that I have, really kind of unnecessary stuff, how much could I give?
Right. Where do I trim the fat so that I can give more? Because there is a very real need in the kingdom. All right, very good. Any other thoughts there? Clint and then Chris.
Just as a logical application, doesn't mean that you have to do it this way, but if you're a big budgeter and you're creating your list of what you budget for, the Lord should be first in the budget. What are you giving them now? And then what do you have to do for food and home and clothing and car and insurance and et cetera? I think it would help your priorities if you place that first.
Right, and you should. That should be the top line. When you look at income, then you look at outgo. The Lord should be first. And then everything else follows, fits under it. Chris.
Sometimes you can look at this as a lesson of what I could have given, the extra that I could have given, versus what I went out and spent, and it was a waste. Most of the time we go buy something, we use it once or twice. I don't even know where the receipt is, just throw it in the garbage. And it's just, it's overcoming. We don't really think a lot of times where the money should be going, what we should be doing. And money controlling us versus us controlling money and the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need to give serious thought to those things. Exactly right. All right, let's take Ron's comment, and then we'll press on.
Stephen, there was a gospel preacher that I had the good fortune to study with, and one of the principles he said, which I believe is a truism, what you do with a little is what you do with a lot.
Right.
So if you learn that principle, even though you have a little, like you gave the example of, that she gave all that she had,
Right.
well, if you're blessed with abundance, you'll do the same.
Right. Yeah, there is that biblical principle. just slipped my mind the way to word it. But you're faithful in a little, you'll be faithful in much. And the Lord talks about, the parable of talents of money. You've been faithful in a few things, I'll make you master over many. So yeah, that is true to the character all the way through. All right, Deuteronomy chapter 15. And this lays out that the Israelites were to be merciful toward those who are less fortunate. Let's read verses 1 through 6, please. Deuteronomy 15, 1 through 6. Who will get that for us?
At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release of debts. And this is the form of the release. Every creditor who's lent anything to his neighbor shall release it. He shall not require it of his neighbor or his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. Of a foreigner you may require it, but you shall give up your claim to what is owed by your brother, except when there may be no poor among you. For the Lord will greatly bless you in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance. Only if you carefully obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe with care all these commandments which I command you today. For the Lord your God will bless you just as he promised you. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. You shall reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over you.
Okay. So he tells them to forgive the debts. There's a little bit of dispute among so-called scholars on this. Some say that in the Sabbath year, you are to forgive the debt completely. Some say it's just the Sabbath year, that payments are suspended because they're not supposed to till their crops, get a crop in, get that income in. To me, the evidence weighs heavily on permanently wiping out the debt because of one of the admonitions given here a little bit later. But be that as it may, what is this idea of forgiving the debts? What's going on here?
Well, they did this 7 years ago. They did the Jubilee year after 50 years. They would forget it. It was the true reset. A true great reset.
Yeah, the land went back to the people in the Jubilee year. Yeah.
It was actually something that would help extinguish debts that weren't payable, so people would be debt slaves forever. It was a very good thing they did.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Nancy?
On a more spiritual scale, it's the idea of forgiveness, of being indebted and being forgiven.
Right. They're exercising that forgiveness of the other person. And it had, again, a very material, financial element to it, very concrete element. But there's a spiritual side of it in them forgiving their fellow Israelite.
I was going to say that Jesus used this as a parable about forgiving of debts and things like that. Now, you have a debt that can never be forgiven, but yet it's forgiven of him. And yet you go to your brother and you can't forgive all of them.
Right.
So, to Nancy's point, I think that's probably what's trying to be driven home to.
Right. Right, exactly right. Now, let's read verses 7 through 11 as he continues on with this idea of a kind, generous, forgiving, helpful spirit. Verses 7 through 11. Who will grab that for us? Zach.
If there is among you a poor man of your brethren within any of the gates of your land, which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart nor shut your hand from your poor brother, but you shall open your hand wide to him and willingly lend him sufficient for his need, whatever he needs. Beware lest there be a wicked thought in your heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of release, is at hand, and your eye be evil against your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry out to the Lord against you, and it become sin among you. You shall surely give to him, and your heart should not be grieved when you give to him, because for this thing the Lord your God will bless you in all your works, and in all to which you put your hand. For the poor will never cease from the land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall open your hand wide to your brother, to your poor and your needy in your land.
Okay. So question number 4, I said, God is concerned with helping the poor. What does the New Testament teach about this, and are there limitations? As he's talking here about the poor in the land, he's talking about that the poor man of your brethren, he's talking about Israelites that are among them, and being generous toward them. What does the New Testament teach about these things? Okay, one of the things he says, back in verse 4, he says essentially there should not be any poor among you, that there be no poor among you. But then verse 11, he says, you're always going to have the poor. There's the ideal situation, but then there's the reality.
Jesus said you have the poor among you always.
Yes, you have the poor among you always.
Galatians 6:10, we're told there, as we have opportunity to do good to all men, particularly those, or especially those of the household of faith. So, if I understand that correctly, we have a responsibility for our fellow man, for humanity, for those that are in need, and to be able to provide to them if we have the means and the opportunity to do so.
Okay, all right, very important principles that Ron mentioned there. There's hardship even among God's people. And here in the law of Moses, recognizing you're going to have poor people among you that are going to need help. You need to help them. You need to look out for them. That's going to alleviate a lot of ills, a lot of social problems, if you will help to take care of the poor. Now, one thing we will note is while this is the law of Moses that applied to the nation of Israel, how was it fulfilled? Did they go and give to the common treasury and then the common treasury dispensed all of that? What's he saying about it here?
I'm not sure this will answer your question, but I know that they weren't supposed to glean their fields and the different things that they would do for the poor.
Okay, there's a part of that, yes. Like Ruth, exactly.
I was going to mention Ruth and about fields.
And he's telling them, you need to do this as an individual Israelite. And there's somebody within your sphere, you help them out. You've got a neighbor, there's a widow you know of, you have extended family, there's an orphan. You help to take care of them.
Be warm and fed. Be warm and fed.
Right, they have to practically do this. And the New Testament teaches we're to take care of people who are in need as well, as we have opportunity. Now, Paul in 2 Corinthians 8 says, not that you would be in want and we be full, so you don't do it to the detriment of your family, but you do look out after people, especially the household of faith, who are in need. Mike, do you have some? Right.
Don't own that all on someone else.
Right. Any other thoughts there?
I just want to mention 1 John 3:17. I often mention 3:16 about the love of man. But if we read 17, but whoever has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him?
Okay. Exactly. We have the ability, and there's one we can help. We are to help them. What are some of the limitations placed on it in the New Testament?
Well, one thing, if a man is not willing to work and provide for his own, you're not to provide for him.
Okay. If a man will not work,
Man shouldn't eat.
neither should he eat. I mean, you think about how that's so contrary to what's happening in our society right now. The Lord says they should starve to death. If you have the ability to work, you won't work, you should just starve to death. And that's where, back in the previous chapter said, your eye will not pity. There should be zero pity for that person. You need to get out there and work. All these people I see out here nowadays, and I'm going to take just a minute, all these people I see out here these days with a sign, please help. There's only like 20 fast food places right here that would hire you. So don't stand out here with a sign, right? Now, are there people who genuinely need help? Yeah. Widows, orphans, those who are disadvantaged, those who have physical, maybe even mental handicaps and challenges and problems that we need to step up and help them out? Sure. Sure, that's there. That's our duty and responsibility. But if you shouldn't work, you shouldn't eat. What else does it tell us? It tells us that if somebody's in sin, we don't enable that sin. All right, we do not. Somebody who is an alcoholic, you do not help them out in that. You need to get that straightened up. You need to forsake your sin, and then we'll talk about helping you out. Mike, okay. All right. Let's jump on to 16 and following next week.